Welcome to the Celluloid Mirror and the second and final installment of our conversation with the one and only Che Broadnax about cinema classics, Speed Racer, and Josie and the Pussycats. Hopefully you have already heard part one of this conversation, and if not, it should be just up or down a little bit on the feed of whatever podcast platform you are currently listening to this episode on right now. But either way, please enjoy the thrilling conclusion of our wide-ranging exploration of these two fine films.
I mean, what do you think? You think they stand a chance? Well, you're on their side, aren't you? Who are you betting on,
Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest one of all?
Look at these lies.
One shall stand, one shall fall.
Even if one of them survives,
the only way to stop him is to make another movie.
I just shared a link with both of you, and we can share it with our audience as well. That's just an interview with the Wachowskis where they talk about all their films, but they talk at some length about the editing in Speed Racer and what they were trying to do. It's the one, if you've seen, there was a tweet going around that had like a screen cap from this.
Oh, right.
With like Lana Wachowski talking about like,
oh,
but there's more also. So this is where that tweet that makes the rounds a lot came from. So we all have pretty positive feelings about these movies. But I know some people who didn't have positive feelings.
I'm sorry, Nicole, I'm gonna have to put in a correction there. You know some fucking morons who have some
I know some
opinions.
fucking I don't know them personally, but I know of them. We've got a lot of lengthy critical drubbings of both films.
I think we can just pull some quick selections from them.
It's very repetitive. It's like really the same. Everyone's knocking them for the same stuff. In the New York Times, Elvis Mitchell like ragged on Josie pretty hard, and then A.O. Smith talked a lot of smack about Speed Racer, although even he like gave some credit to the visuals. Like that's an ongoing theme. Like critics will be like, this movie sucks. It looks amazing at least some of the time, but you know, it sucks. Elvis Mitchell's review of Josie was super petty. It's like one of those, like he clearly went in just being like, this is a ripoff. It's a remake. It's like crass commercial garbage. He said it is based on a foundation of sand, like just all sorts of like.
Oh, yeah. I read that, too. And I was like, it's based on a foundation of sand if that sand is Tatooine, because this is fucking Star Wars level epic hero's journey storytelling. So in fact, one of my notes right here is bowling alley. This is their Tatooine moisture farm.
It absolutely is. But there's a part that Sean and I were both very mad about, where he says a recent Simpsons episode in which Bart and his friends became pop sensations and were used to sell future generations on joining the Navy, like trumped Josie on the boy band satire. And Sean and I are both like,
Simpsons did it as not film criticism.
No, are you 14 years old and on Reddit? Because like this is what you say when you're like don't like something and you're annoyed and you're like this other thing did it. I'm like the Simpsons has done literally everything. Like as Sean and I were discussing, including reality. How many parts of reality did the Simpsons do better? So I just don't know what to tell you about that. And the main thing though. Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
No, go for it. I'm interrupting you. Sorry.
The one other petty thing he said that I want to call out is he complains about Tara Reid's fake drumming, which seemed like such a petty thing to me to be like, and also, and by the way, and it was so interesting to me because, you know, I had just rewatched this with my husband, Sean, who up until, you know, I guess it's been about 10 years now that he's been a music journalist. But before that, he was a professional musician. And I mean, he still is a musician. And we were literally talking about how good we felt the miming in this film was, like how much they really sell it.
Yeah, they went to band camp. They went to band camp.
And they sell it. I believe them as a band. And I'm just like, look, if my professional musician husband wasn't getting taken out of it by Tara Reid's drummings, like, I don't know, maybe Elvis Mitchell is a drummer or something, but like, you are getting, that is very nitpicky.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is, because that is the kind of shit that will take me out of it sometimes, and definitely will take Sean out of it. And it's like, come on. But the main,
some of that I wonder. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say some of that. I wonder if it's that, like, Tara Reid, especially around that time, was a very common target for criticism because she's that archetype of the blonde, and she was very in the tabloids and stuff like that. And I think she had a really rough
she's
time.
She's dating Carson Daly at the time,
and they had a really. I think she had a really rough time of it after that.
Yeah.
She's had, she did. I think it's just more of that, honestly.
Not the same backstory,
Me too.
but like it's similar to like a Megan Fox situation where she just shows up in things and people are going to throw stuff at her, basically.
Yeah.
Which is like, oh, you're the woman today that we're going to like all like call
which
a
really
witch,
sucks
basically.
When I watch this and I watch like, what's it called? Lebowski. Like, she's actually quite good at doing different versions of this archetype that
it's
she
like
sort of physically
Nyland,
represents.
Kind of. From Rose Nyland from Golden Girls, the dumb one.
Right. Yeah.
But still is one of the primary characters you care about. And one of the things I like in Josie is like, yeah, she's kind of like the dumb spacey one, but she's also phenomenally insightful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to say also, like, what would happen in that movie if after Wyatt Frame, which I want to say his name is Wyatt, probably because his name is White Ass Wally, so Wyatt is white. But then if that's the case, then his name is White Frame, and like he's going around trying to take authentic musicians and like craft them into like pop commodities. That's some next level shit right there. Especially, I'm sorry, I wanted to talk about Melody, but especially because Wyatt's plan to break the band up and just focus on the Josie commodity involves the intentional leaving out of Val. Like, he leaves her on the corner with the I didn't notice you weren't in here. He leaves out her invitation, and it's like, are you intentionally cutting out Valerie Brown, like the heir to rock and roll through blood from this band? Like, that seems about white. But what I was going to say about Melody is when they're getting signed, and they're like, yo, is anything else strange about this? And she's like, yeah, like the way he ordered, super triple whatever and scraped the foam off, and he could have just said this, or the way that he keeps folding his napkin over and over, like he's afraid he doesn't have any real friends and everybody just wants to use him because he's a big music guy. And they're like, and it's like, what if they came back to the table and instead of using him because he's a big music guy, they engaged him on his wound of being afraid that he didn't have any real friends? Could they have broken the cycle in that moment had they listened to Melody?
Maybe Fiona would have to be there though for that to work, so that they could have their bonding that allows them to both exit their toxic, coping mechanisms.
What if they took him on a road trip though? Took him on a road trip, and at the end of it, he reveals that he really loves Fiona. Like, you could have a whole other movie from that moment.
Yeah, and what if in that road trip they're driving a T5 with a Bernoulli conversionator? Sounds pretty beefy, Pops.
I could spend a lot of time talking about what I hate about all these reviews, but basically the main themes that repeat through, I believe, all of these reviews about both movies is some version of this film is trying to have its cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
In Josie, that takes the form of a ton of criticism of what is seen as product placement. Like, there's a lot of reference to product placement, despite the fact, tell me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we see any products. We see brands. We see logos. for all these different brands, but it's not like now Melody's eating a Big Mac. It's just there's McDonald's in the
there's
shower.
Usually there's usually like logos and stuff.
Yeah.
I think there might be like the Walkman she uses, like
Was
the
it branded,
Discman,
though?
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a Discman.
Yeah, there are
Discman.
some of them, but like the dominant
but
forms of it.
mostly it's branding and not product placement.
As I learned, I might have learned this before, but from stuff I read with the directors, it wasn't a brand partnership of the sort that all the critics were saying it was. They didn't get any money for any of this. And in fact, they had considered doing the Speed Racer thing and having a bunch of made up stuff, but they thought that the satiric punch would land harder if they were using real brands. And in fact, like they did get permission because like, you know, it's a studio picture. They want to make sure, and it's not the most flattering thing. So it is the kind of thing that somebody might get mad about if you didn't get permission. And they were saying like Target, for example, was just like, whatever, we're Target. Great. Like we're like the way they described it is like, we're so much bigger than this. Like, also, it clearly makes them look like they can take a joke too. So like arguably they're getting something out of it. But then the Gap, on the other hand, they like approached the Gap. They were like, we wanted to do one of those commercials, like everybody invests, everybody in plaid, like one of those turn of the millennium conformity Gap ads, and have it be like everyone in leopard. But the Gap was like, no, you are not dragging our brand. They're like, oh yeah, okay, like send us the script. And they sent them the script and they were just like, yeah, that's going to be a hard pass. Get out of the building. Like no interest. So like a lot of brands were like, oh yeah, we don't want to touch this. Some of them in their like postmodern late 90s turn of the millennium way were like, oh yeah, we can take a joke. Sure, you can. But it wasn't advertising for them. None of that was paid for. Some brands at least turned it down, and maybe there was like the Discman, maybe there were some other things, but the bulk of the time, it's not even like you can say like, oh, they're criticizing it, but they're also showing how cool the stuff is. They never show how cool the stuff is. It's just the fucking logos plastered everywhere, and
usually out of context.
Yeah, in bizarre contexts that like highlight and call attention to the way we are surrounded by advertising at all times, even more so now than in 2001. I don't leave that movie feeling remotely positively towards Target or McDonald's because they were in a movie I like. I'm left, even though like, and I do shop at Target because it is here and convenient and has the things I need to buy. I feel kind of gross about it. And when I think about Josie and the Pussycats, that makes me feel even grosser about shopping at Target.
Buy from Target.
Sorry. What?
What?
Nothing.
I didn't hear anything. Nothing.
Join the army.
You know,
Join the army.
I think we can. This will be a theme we can discuss more. I really tried to think about this, and it made me think about the recent controversy around Nomadland and Amazon. And how, so like Nomadland, I don't believe they got any money from Amazon, but Frances McDormand like was like, hey, what if we shot the scenes where my character's working at Amazon in an actual Amazon facility? And Chloe Zhao was like, they're never going to let us do that. And she's like, let me see, and wrote them some letter. And they're like, yes, Frances McDormand, like you can pretend to be an Amazon employee. And I'm not even going to go down the rabbit hole of my personal opinions on any of that because it's kind of neither here nor there. I just want to point out that the critique of Nomadland in terms of that was you have this character working in an actual Amazon facility and you're not portraying Amazon negatively enough. You're making it look like Amazon is potentially like a helpful thing, which I'm not going to go down analyzing that myself, but like that's the criticism is Amazon is a horrible company that does horrible things and treats workers horribly, and they look kind of like neutral to somewhat benevolent in your film. You can't make that argument about Josie and the Pussycats.
No.
You can't make
you
that.
really
They
can't.
they did basically the same thing that Nomadland did in terms of being like, hey, can we use your logo? Can we, for free, use a thing? And from some people, we're told yes. But then, unlike Nomadland, they go out of their way to contextualize all that shit in an incredibly negative way. Like, that's the whole plot of the movie. So it was wild to me to see these critics, one after the other, just be like these cynical hypocrites trying to be like, we're too cool for corporations while giving them free advertising. And I was trying to do the intellectual exercise of being like, okay, I love this movie, but I can still criticize it at the same time. Let me think through this. What do I think? In a way, sure, you are adding to brand recognition by having it there at all. In a way, the house always wins no matter what you do. I'm not arguing about like how effective politically Josie and the Pussycats critique is. I'm just saying I think it's bizarre to pile on it like this as opposed to any other movie.
Yeah.
And that's my 2 cents there.
I think it has a little bit to do with what's allowed to be a subversive movie, and it's really not the actually submersive movies. Like subversive movies, this is a very subversive movie because it is all wrapped up in the candy coated package of like just like consumerist blah blah blah, and then it's got that message buried in it. It's not the dour like it's not the dour criticism of capitalism. Like, it is a more subversive movie than, for example, Sorry to Bother You, which is very upfront about what it's doing, because it's you know it's coating the pill in sugar and butter and all the other good stuff,
and it's marketing to the demographic that is being marketed to by the like, that's the thing. It's like, oh, hey, the exact same targets that are the demographic of the stuff we're critiquing, we're marketing this to you. So it was like direct in that
both
way.
Of these movies are that. Like, both of these movies have that thing where they get criticized because they're not serious enough. And certainly if we look at like the year that Speed Racer came out, 2008, the movie everybody was shitting their pants about was Christopher Nolan's inferior The Dark Knight. I mean, Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, which is just a by the numbers really thriller that is way too fucking long and is only celebrated because one of the actors died. And people shit their pants about Batman.
I want to just add that actually I thought the score that Zimmer added to the Joker scenes, like I thought his Joker theme with the Joker in that movie, I really liked that I want to say I really like that about the movie. I'm also very aware that it's a movie where Batman goes full totalitarian and like
full fashion.
he goes so fashy that like his boy, a black billionaire, is just, or I don't know how much money Lucius Fox has, but if Bruce Wayne has $1 billion and Lucius doesn't, Batman's even worse. So, but anyways, even Lucius Fox is like, bro,
come on,
like, I'm out. I'm not doing this shit no more. I'm not beating up poor people with you anymore, Batman. Spying on everyday citizens just so you can find the bad guys. That is a bridge too far. Except for he says it mellifluously because it's
But people did not at the time, people weren't picking up on the superiority of Speed Racer. On Rotten Tomatoes, Speed Racer is currently 41% fresh with critics and 60% with audiences. I feel like the audience might be a little high because of the like after the fact Speed Racer renaissance would be my guess. But I think things are even more skewed on Josie, even though Josie is only 53% fresh with critics and 52% with audiences. And I say that because when I looked at them, obviously, because Josie and the Pussycats is an earlier movie that came out, I don't know what year Rotten Tomatoes started, but like I think it existed when Speed Racer came out, and it did.
It might have existed when Josie did.
But they don't have reviews on there. They have very few reviews on there from when Josie came out. Almost all of the critical reviews that they're drawing from to come up with this percentage of freshness are from the intervening years. There's like one or two from 2001. And so it includes more of those kind of after the fact critical reassessments. Because I would say the reviews of Josie at the time were way worse than 53% fresh. It would have been like 15% fresh. Because, like, I mean, Ebert gave it half a star. Much as I love Ebert, he is wrong about all the movies that we discuss on this show.
He really is. It was founded in 1998.
He's a fool.
Okay, so...
But I knew it. I knew Rotten Tomatoes was one of those, like, Alta Vista era things that just, like, didn't really pop off until, like, the mergers of Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, IMDb, and probably like one other thing, and then suddenly I was like, okay, now
because I was into Metacritic before I was into Rotten Tomatoes, and then whatever. That's another podcast. But they were both also box office failures. Like, despite the fact that
I'm sorry, Speed Racer.
In this room, at least some of us saw both of them in the theater. It appears, but so Speed Racer grossed almost 44 million domestically, and its worldwide gross was almost 94 million, but it was still considered a commercial failure, somewhat understandably, considering that it cost over $120 million to make, and God knows how much to promote. Like, God knows what that advertising...
Probably at least that much.
And then Josie only grossed, like, about $15 million, and its budget was estimated between 22 to 39 million, which is quite a range. Like,
I feel like
that's like between one movie and two movies. If its budget is 22... or maybe 40. Like,
so its budget was either this or twice as much as that, and we're not talking 1 to 2 million.
That's a big plus or minus.
Yeah, that sounds like the production company was like, we don't want to tell people how much money we lost on that.
Yeah. So and God knows how much the advertising budget for that was, and also the advertising campaign for that was not the most representative. They both won or were at least nominated for a bunch of, like, relatively minor awards, mostly that I've never heard of or that are like Teen Choice or MTV awards, basically. As understandably, Speed Racer got nominated for a bunch of technical stuff and sound, although it was also nominated for worst prequel, ripoff, remake, or sequel at the Razzies, which fuck the Razzies is honestly also a ongoing theme of this show.
You know, the Razzies are they're the same as the Oscars in that they're just determined by, like, buzz and money instead of by what's actually bad or good.
They're also, like, this one podcast I listened to called This Had Oscar Buzz, where they discuss movies that had Oscar buzz and then were not nominated for anything. They're always ragging on how misogynistic the Razzies are, which I hadn't quite thought of before, but I'm like, that's really true. They really love to take, like, a talented woman and be like, most awful, blah, like, you're terror. And you're like, she's not even the problem with that movie, though. But you just like to...
Yeah, exactly. Women. That's not why Catwoman is bad. No, that isn't. like it's...
So what do these films reflect about one another? One topic, I've put some subtopics we can use or not on this doc.
My question is, do we have a spot set aside to talk about the gender nonconforming truck driver in Speed Racer?
But now would be a great... Yes, we do, and it's right now.
Let's talk about gender nonconforming truck driver.
Okay, so in 2008, watching Speed Racer, Che Broadnax, cis male, man, mask person who frankly did not have any, like, out gender nonconforming people in my immediate circle. So when we are introduced to all these different characters that are like the gangsters, and the truck driver has sort of what we would consider classically masculine features in 2008 if we were like a cishet dude. But they're wearing some, like, female coded clothes and, like, makeup and stuff like that. So in 2008, I was like, yo, what's the deal? Like, this is an intentional choice. What is happening here? What's the cut scene? Like, are they in a disguise? Blah, 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 blah. in 2021, obviously knowing all of the things I know now, the Wachowskis just threw a gender nonconforming character in willy-nilly, like they throw in all sorts of international characters and other stuff. And right, the director of a film is the driver of the film.
True.
So I just made that up, that part. But like, for real, like, it's like it was an interesting moment for me to be watching it and be like, oh yeah, I remember in 2008 being like, huh, what's that about? And now just being like, duh.
Oh.
Like, not duh because it's 2021, but duh because it's 2021. And also I know the things I know about the Wachowskis, and I know the things I know about, like, gender constructs that I did not know then. So that was a real interesting thing that happened when I watched it this time.
Yeah, and I think the Wachowski movies, the ones I've seen, because I have not, as Che and I just discussed earlier this week, I have not seen Cloud Atlas or Jupiter Ascending, although I would like to, because even if they're terrible, like I am interested in what the Wachowskis are doing, so I want to see it. But their stuff's always about gender, right? And it's all, like, at some level, in some ways, that's a theme that's going through and, like, undermining mainstream oppressive binary ideas about gender, right? That goes throughout, like, going back to Bound, they're dealing with this stuff. And I think it's interesting because this makes me think of a scene in Josie and the Pussycats that I didn't know if we'd have an opportunity to discuss, that I am always very struck by, which is the scene where Fiona tries to bond with the Pussycats to do girl stuff. I love this scene so much, and it's like Parker Posey's like, let's have girl time and do girl stuff, and it's like this very exaggerated, stereotypical, very toxic idea of what it is to have girlfriends, and it's all about competing for who weighs the least and things like that, like all these really awful. And I love this scene so much, in part because, to a degree, I empathize with every single character in that scene, because I empathize with the Pussycats in their, like, sheer horror at being kind of forced into, like, socializing with someone who wants something from them that they're like, this isn't what being a girl means to us at all. This has like nothing to do with it. It's this weird alien patriarchal, like, oppressive notion that Fiona, having never had female friends, like, that's all she knows, and she thinks that's what it's supposed to be. And the Pussycats are like, oh, get away from me. Like, I do know that feeling. I've been the Pussycats in similar situations, but I also relate to Fiona in that I also felt that I was not properly socialized in all sorts of ways, including gender, and, like, didn't know how to be a girl, right? That is, like, definitely relate to that at all. And I'm like, oh my God, I also really relate to Fiona trying to connect with other women and, like, do things right, and kind of knowing at some level that I'm, like, wrong and not doing it right. Like, don't know how to be a girl, don't know how to be a woman, don't know what that is, and being like, I'm trying. Yeah. And it just knowing that I'm, like, not doing what is expected of me. So that scene I find very, actually, like, emotionally impactful. And I think
so good. It's such a good scene. And I think
it's not unrelated from some of the stuff that the Wachowskis do, and that it is kind of like problematizing this idea of what is a girl, what is a woman, like, what are the social, how is this something that is constructed, how is this something that is performative, how can you take it though and turn it into something that is feminist and good, like the Pussycats' little socialist commune they live in, and as opposed to, like, the Fiona, like, we've got to be competitive and catty and all of that.
Well, even on maybe a little more subtle thing that they're doing in the movie, because it makes me think about Josie herself in the movie, because she's very girly, like, she's pining for the guy and, like, pink and things like that, but she's also fixing his car. And at no point is she like rejecting the idea of being girly. At no point is she like, oh, I don't want to be girly. I don't want to get made over or anything like that. She doesn't play that sort of thing where she's like, I can fix stuff. I don't want to be girly. And she's got to be convinced to be girly. Nor is she girly and then and is hiding that she can do all these other things. She has sort of this much more balanced approach to it.
You want to know what? Josie McCoy, she's all that.
She most certainly is. She most certainly is. Yeah, I think Josie and the Pussycats, much like the Wachowski's entire oeuvre, is a very like pro-femme movie. It's not anti-femme. It's not seeing femme as being antithetical to competency, toughness, anything like that. Characters can be feminine and do things that would traditionally patriarchally be considered masculine at the same time, and there's no contradiction there. That's the same thing in the Wachowski universe. And much as Che pointed out, like Trixie is not a great character, but she is still hitting those beats, you know, of like she has certain like traditionally like feminine qualities. And also like in that fight scene that I just love. Yes.
Well, she's like back to back with Speed, and she's wearing like the pink shirt and he's wearing the blue shirt, and they're both doing like the same kicks together and stuff. It's like so awesome in the way that it's awesome.
It's not like anyone's like, Trixie, I didn't know you could do that. You know, it's not the like, that's a girl. Yeah. It's like, no, it's just part of the world is, of course, like, unfortunately, she doesn't get enough to do in that film. But like they still like very much make the point that, you know, even though that's a much more male dominated movie than most of the Wachowski stuff is, I think they still make a point to have to some degree Mom, Racer and Trixie, like, I don't want to say they're complicated characters. They're not.
Nope.
But they're not like straight stereotypes or anything like that either.
Right. Mom is seen in the final montage both making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches as well as welding. I hate to say that that's any sort of progressive message because I ain't seen Pops Racer make a single sandwich. And there is also a scene where Pops Racer's like, your mom usually keeps me from making an ass out of myself, but this time I was determined to. But even though it's through this like, gee golly, you know, like patriarch of the family lens, that is also the scene wherein he breaks the cycle by deciding that being a tough patriarch doesn't mean that you can't, whatever, it doesn't. But Josie and the Pussycats, feminist.
I agree, and I think that all the Wachowski movies are feminist to some degree, as well as all the Wachowski movies. I think it's very fair to say that they are all like explicitly anti-capitalist in one way or another, and in their case, like that is 100% intentional. Josie and the Pussycats, I was reading a transcript of an interview with the directors, where the interviewer was basically like, "This is a socialist movie. That's what I'm getting from it." And Harry Elfont was basically like, look, I don't want to be that guy who's like, whatever you get from the movie is great. But basically he was like, look, and Deborah Kaplan was elaborating as well. Like, they're like, look, the thing that we were consciously trying to do in the film was we kind of smelled this corporate backlash coming to kind of the first part of the 90s in the music industry specifically, where the message of all that music, the stuff I think is great, the stuff I think is crap, still the message was like, be yourself, think for yourself, somewhat anti-authoritarian, like to a greater or lesser degrees of sophistication. Like, that was the message. That's what was cool. And then they were like, we kind of smelled that the music industry was kind of starting to be like, okay, enough of that, though. Here's some product we're going to give you, and we're going to tell you what's cool, and you're going to like it. So basically, they predicted the whole 2000s, because that is what happened in pop culture in general in the 2000s.
Yeah. In fact, in the scene where Wyatt Frame brings the CD to the Virgin Megastore, wherever it is that he goes to, and he meets the free thinking teen, and then they black bag her and kidnap her. When the van pulls off, it reveals MTV.com. And I always think, yo, they black bagged the individual free thinker, and like, to me in that moment was just like, yeah, that's what they do. MTV.com, it predicted it was going that, like, oh yeah, we're going to the internet, we're going to social media, that's where we're going to control them teens and get them to buy our jerkin Adidas or whatever.
And, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Sorry, but that reminds me of, I watched and I brought this up I think probably already once in what we've recorded so far, but the QAnon like doc series, the Q Into the Storm thing. I think one of the things that really hit me while watching it, there was a couple things, but one of the things that really hit me while watching it was that where we are now, especially like with QAnon, you trace all the way back to 20 years ago, more or less, and some of the earlier things on the internet, Something Awful and stuff like that. Like everything about where everything is at right now, the seeds were there really when this was happening, and they were seeing it. And I think, I wasn't really thinking about the MTV.com thing, but that's a fantastic point, is that, they looked at it and they saw the seeds were there. And I mean, I think, I don't want to be the person who says, whatever you get out of the movie is great, that's fine. But also, like, they don't have to have been consciously thinking about like making a socialist movie to be criticizing what was happening at the time. They don't have, like, I think that's even better, because what they were doing is they're criticizing what they were seeing. It happens to fit in with a certain message that is resonant, especially right now. But that's because they were criticizing the reality that they were seeing. They weren't necessarily trying to say, here is our political perspective that we were putting in a film, even though that's what it was. They were just approaching it with, well, here's the world and here's what's fucked with the world. Let's criticize that. And to it happens clear, to resonate this way. Go ahead. No.
And to be clear, Harry Elfont, exactly. This is exactly where I was, my mind goes with it as well. And Harry Elfont was saying, like, basically, that's great. You get anti-cat, like, that's not in any way, shape, or form, like, contrary to what we were trying to do. They weren't like, well, no, we were anti-corporate, but not anti-capitalist, even though, like, they were consciously, criticizing corporations and corporate overreach and this, that, and the other thing. But they're like, yeah, because I think, like you were saying, Sean, I think the logical conclusion one comes to, whether today or in 2001, from like thinking about being yourself, not letting oppressive forces dictate to you what to think, making up your own mind. Capitalism is antithetical to all of that. Capitalism is antithetical to art. Capitalism is antithetical to family or friendship, or like all of you living together and chipping in what you can and having a mutual aid kind of model for how you just run your life, which is what we see in Josie and the Pussycats.
That's right.
So
capitalism just wants to steer. It doesn't know how to drive.
It does not know how to drive. And that's why we keep like it keeps running into a wall and then being like, well, the problem clearly isn't me. It's this wall here. Why don't you take this wall away so I can just plow into something else?
That was brought to you by the Army.
Yes. So I think that's really interesting that it's like, I think Speed Racer is intentionally an anti-capitalist movie. Josie isn't quite consciously intentionally, but the directors are kind of like, oh yeah, it is now. They're like, yeah, it totally is. We were focused here, but the logical conclusion of this is that. Yeah. And I think that's what this really speaks to, which there's something, it's nice to look at them together. There's something really gratifying of those two different approaches kind of ending up with the same thing.
And the thing that's cool about that, two different approaches ending up with starting with the same place. We're going to criticize consumer, corporate culture, ownership over, the people that do. We're gonna criticize. Let's just call it, I don't know, I'm gonna come up with a random term that covers all the marketers and blah blah. I'll just call that capital for the heck of it, and the relationship it has with the people that are actually like making the music or driving the cars. We'll call them labor. So they both start with sort of an idea about like, okay, let's look at this conflict that exists between capital and labor, and then both movies take different routes to get to the same conclusion, which is that in industrializing the production of art, industrializing the production of friendship is impossible. That's where they both end. And, like Josie, Val, and Mel have to find that out by, like agreeing to the double. You heard Kit Kat just then? Wow. He was like, Kit Kat agrees. We're talking, Kit Kat, we're talking about your people. We're not. We're talking about the Rachel Dolezals of cats right now, honestly. But they learn the hard way. And then also Speed also learns the hard way, but a different way. He takes the high road, right? But they both wind up at the same place, which is that, the money is the root of all the evil. And it's true. But I think like with Josie, it's like that is a quintessential rock and roll movie. It is every movie about like, I made it to the top and now I'm getting a little bit, thrown off track by all of the stuff at the top and all this crazy stuff that isn't why I got into it in the first place. It's like,
and they split up the band
and they split up the band and it's like, oh, then they got to come back together. Like literally, actually the superhero movie that Matt and I wrote in 99, like we didn't know it when we were writing it, but one of my good friends after reading it was like, oh, this is great. This is a classic indie band signs to a label story, because it's like about a bunch of superheroes who aren't popular and they start a comic book about themselves and then they get bought up by the big comic book company and then they don't have any time for superheroing because they're busy marketing and one of them's got an ego and then they got to run really fast. It all comes back to what was once called Heroes United by Matt Sears and Che Broadnax. It'll never be made. It can't be made in a world that has now had like 12 years of nonstop superhero movies. But in an alternate year 2000, that movie is made. And then people are like, wow, Speed Racer and Josie and the Pussycats have a lot in common with Heroes United.
It contains the seeds of so much.
It does, yeah. Well, Kaplan and Elfont saw that script and were like, wow, we need to make a script that contains even more seeds than this because it's going to have this in it.
And I want to make it clear also to our listeners that like, so we're all saying these movies are anti-capitalist. It's not just us saying this and that one interview. If you Google anti-capitalist and either of these movies, you'll find a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You'll find a lot of stuff. Like, this isn't our, like, weird esoteric interpretation in accordance with our politics. Like, this, this is a pretty... We're not the only ones picking up on this.
But one of the things I was thinking about when there's that, oh, you made a socialist movie. We didn't really think about it that way, is I think that there's the difference between analysis and expression, and when you're expressing, you're not always thinking about like where exactly your expression fits in. Like you're like, especially when you're making something as resonant, you're not necessarily going like, oh yeah, here's the specific track that my expression is going to be, and you're just like, man, this stuff, fuck this stuff, and then you write a thing about that. And then analysis has got to take it and go like, well, here are the words that describe what you did. 20 years of internet and everybody being now a film critic and in the discussion and all that stuff has kind of made it to the point where
everybody's a film critic.
And now a message from our own podcast. But yeah, it's just like everybody's got to have the language of analysis ready on hand for what they're doing. I mean, I see it or you see it when you're talking with students oftentimes, and they're talking about making something, and they're like, I want to make something that fits in this. And I'm just like, that's going to suck.
Absolutely.
Because they're saying, I want something. It's that kid. I always think back to when I was in college, and there was the one guy in the English classes who, when we all went around and introduced ourselves, because an English major, he was like, I am a postmodernist. I'm like, no, motherfucker, you're a student. And irritating the shit out of me in every single class we have together. I don't remember his name, but I remember that he's a postmodernist. And anyway, it's just like, oh, I've got to fit this lane. It's like, no, make the thing, shoot the thing, write the thing, record the thing with the music, whatever. Do that.
Yeah. Stop steering and start driving.
Exactly. Stop steering and start driving. Create your art of racing or whatever. And I think, that they are like, yeah, sure, it's what you find in it, because they didn't start with that, but they were expressing it because they were expressing what they were like, that's fucked. And
I think
also,
I think we've all talked about how the process of making something is often also the process of figuring out what you're making and what it's about. If you start, you have to start out with some questions, with some itches you need to scratch, with some themes you're curious about pursuing. If you start with okay, here's my thesis, and I'm going to write a script that supports my thesis, it's going to feel a little dead.
Yeah.
It's
going to feel like data, and it's going to feel like data-driven art, which is exactly what both of these movies rail against.
Exactly.
And in fact, I also wanted to say some of the funniest stuff in what am I talking about? Everything's funny, but every time Wyatt tries to drop some oh, I have all this insight because I work for a big record label, it's always meaningless or wrong, and he gets called on it, and the way he always responds is awesome too. He's like, we don't want to let you don't want to let things just pass you by. Look what happened to the Beastie Boys. And they're like, the Beastie Boys are famous. And he's like, exactly. And then when it's like, our studies have shown that bands with the word "and" in them sell twice as many records as bands without.
And they're like,
and then
the Beatles.
What about the Rolling Stones?
Val is like, what about the Beatles? What about the Rolling Stones? What about the Backstreet Boys? He's like, yes. Well, obviously, yes, if you want to get technical. It's so good.
It is.
Because I'm going to tell y'all, if any of y'all out there have not worked in corporate, I'm going to tell you, they have no idea how artists do art. They really be like, here's this data, which is determined that the audience is interested in these things. Here's this data, which is determined this. We have to create something that gets in there. And then it's there's no thought about they can't feel the emotional arc unless there's data that suggests that all movies should have an arc here or whatever. And then it can somehow, is this reaching our benchmark for the dark tea time of the soul part of the movie? No, data is showing it's straying. Oh yeah, our eyeball analysis is showing people are looking around the room and their heart rates are going back to normal. That's not how you make art, man. You can't just turn knobs on the Mega Sound 8000. 5,000. I say 8,000.
I didn't remember.
Because by now it's the 8,000.
2021.
Yeah, by now it's the 8,000.
Exactly.
You got to save the cat.
You have to save the Pussycats.
But
do we have some time to ask some questions of these movies, just some things that maybe didn't sit super well?
Please, yes, always.
Because one thing that has always felt not 100% there in Josie is there's a lot of Backdoor Lover, the Du Jour song. is like there, but is not quite contextualized in any real way. And there's a couple of other like, is this a gay jokes that are like in there, but it's like I feel like they don't feel like they're punching down. I feel like there might have been some conversation about like, haha, all these teen girls are in love with this band that song is like coded in this way or another.
Oh, I thought it was sorry.
I didn't take it
I thought it was a joke on a specific song. Like, wasn't there a joke about how I Want It That Way is about the same topic?
Yes.
Oh, you mean so?
I think that's what it was.
Crowd.
I think it was a joke about that that many boy band songs are coded dirty things.
I didn't take it as. I took it as a joke on the kind of meta topic of pop songs that are like for the whole family, but you're like, wait a second, what is this about? And you're like, oh, this is actually about like something pretty dirty, but I didn't see it as being about like dudes being with other dudes necessarily. I wasn't taking it.
That's interesting.
I didn't take it that way.
I had read it originally as like a gay butt sex song.
Reasonable. That's very reasonable.
Just then I was reading it as like a Christian, you're still a virgin if you do it in the butt
that
song,
feels more
which could be way more on it. But I sort of felt like, because there's also the moment where there's the one guy in the crowd at the very beginning who's like, oh, I love du jour, like brothers or whatever. And it's like, I don't think we're laughing at him. No. You know, I think it's more like, that's a guy, that's a real guy or whatever. But there's still something about it felt a little hairy to me.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I guess the movie feels so queer to me, like in large part because of Alan Cumming. And like Ebert was kind of like, oh, Alan Cumming playing the like gay villain. And I'm like, well, I mean, one, his character's not gay. But two, is that a queer character? Of course it is. But like, I felt like all of this was coming from a queer sensibility. Maybe that's something I'm bringing to it. I don't, I can't speak for the directors and writers, but so I felt like the du jour fan, I felt like that was more of an acknowledgement of how things are than like punching down on that kid, let alone punching down on that kid for being like gay or bi or whatever. Like that's
right.
Well,
no. That's how I read it. But like I was saying, it felt like I read that kid. It felt.
It's worth discussing though, because I'm sure there are people who also watched it and laughed and were like, oh, gay. I'm sure, if tons of people had seen this movie, I would say tons of people were watching it and laughing at it for the wrong reasons. Because, like, when all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. When all you have is homophobia, everything's homophobic. So, like, any reference of queerness is like, and you're like, well, that's not why that's there, but that's the only way you can interpret things. So, but I do think this movie, like, is ripe for that kind of misinterpretation in these minor ways, for sure.
That's true. What if? And
I think it was representing very well, like, what was going, like, as I said, like, I was only just about to graduate high school at the time, like that sort of gender division in pop music of like, oh, there's all the girls who are doing like into this, and then there's the one guy. And the way he defends himself, I didn't necessarily, you can kind of pay, like, is he gay? Is he not? Or does he just genuinely love it? And then he has this self-conscious moment
and
of
he has to say that because
no homo. Yeah.
Exactly.
Pause.
Like, yeah.
Very,
That's
very
another
much.
Great way to read it.
Yeah. Very much of the moment, but also still very relevant because of how things are divided.
Yeah. But I'm thinking about it also, because you were in high school at the time. So you were the actual demographic, and I was just out of college. And I had actually already gone through my awkward phase of like, my friend and I trying to figure out, how do we buy this like Britney Spears debut CD in this record store without it like challenging our masculinity? And I mean, like, it took about a week of plotting and planning before we realized, like, whatever, like, just fucking buying a CD.
For context, for me at the time, I was coming out of about a year and a half, about 2 years where I spent 1 year and then about every other month the next year performing Sweet Transvestite at school dances. The first time in a bustier. The first time in a bustier, later times not so much. I didn't do the full thing the other times. And more than once in a full sequin dress around the school. Not performing, just for various other reasons. Yeah. In a full, like, Friends blue sequin dress. So I was pretty comfortable with the in-between space.
Yeah, no, I had having been like the only black guy in my friend group, like the performance of black masculinity was exhausting. Mm-hmm. But like it was the identity. And so I painted myself into a lot of corners that took a long time for that paint to dry so I could walk out of the corner without leaving messy footprints.
That's fair. I also made a lot of people uncomfortable in that dress. My legs looked great in it. But a lot of people were like, this is weird and you're making me uncomfortable. And I'm like, okay. Oh, I remember one of the reasons I was doing it, raising money for yearbook. We had a Mr. Ugly contest. One of the days I was wearing the dress. It was a weirdly problematic thing. It was like a beauty contest for guys. It was trying to be an anti-beauty contest where you just go around and you get votes by raising money. So for yearbook staff, I was the yearbook editor my senior year. And the 90s, it was trying. It was trying.
The 90s, it was trying is another good title for this podcast.
In both ways that you can read that phrase. The 90s, it was trying, and the 90s, it was trying.
It was trying. It was trying.
That would be. Maybe we'll have to release this one under multiple titles.
The 90s, it was trying. The story of the 2020s comic book movies.
That'll be one of the variant covers for this episode.
Oh my god!
Yeah, the shiny hologram embossed variant.
You mean the mirrored whale intestine tunnel? That'll be the background. That'll be the reflective
the
reference.
Whale intestine chromium cover.
Listen, it's out there. It's out there now. Since I already just said like what the plot to this movie that I wrote 22 years ago was, but like the whole thing was about like in the 90s when like the big two comic book companies, everybody got all mad and like went indie rogue and then immediately like sold out and stuff, and everything was like covered with shiny hologram covers and chromium embossed whatever, and like that's the whole movie. So it's the same movie. It's like it's literally it's basically Josie and the Pussycats meets maybe like Ghostbusters. Like it's kind of the Ghostbusters arc and the Josie and the Pussycats arc. I think it's
a missed opportunity for the world.
It would have been dope. Yeah, exactly. We had to completely rethink it.
I think that if E.P. Royalton was here right now, though, he would probably buy that screenplay from you because he's like pretty into just snapping up IP.
Yeah.
As we didn't talk about how when he first shows up at the racer house and mom feeds him pancakes. And he's like, these pancakes are great. I want to buy the recipe. And she's like, I'll give you the recipe. And he's like, no. I want to own the recipe. You don't understand how. And they're like, that doesn't make any sense.
I was like, no, you can't. You can't just give things away.
Columbus. No, that's so deep, right? Because like, what is, it as according to like as feudalism and like devolves into mercantilism and capitalism and blah blah blah. Like, what is this idea of ownership, right? Is like to own the land. It means you have to be able to like improve it, quote unquote, right? Make it more productive, harvest stuff from it, right? And so that transforms the land from where you are to like a thing that you have that you can improve, that you can own, right? And it's like, she's like, yo, this is a pancake recipe. How can a person own a pancake recipe? But he's just like, yo, man, I'ma own it. Once you own something, then you could dominate it.
And what's the point of things if you're not dominating them?
Yeah, except for, you cannot dominate it because you can't steer, you just have to drive.
This also reminds me, the pancake thing also reminds me of the other mentioned 2008 movie. Royalton insists that he must buy the pancake, and the Joker says, if you do something well, never do it for free. Now, is Royalton both the Joker and Bruce Wayne?
Holy shit. Why didn't we do the Dark Knight and Speed Racer?
I just rewatched that recently. I don't need to.
I'm not gonna.
You don't need to.
I watched parts of it. And like I do. I shit on it, but I do think like, actually, it's a good movie to watch.
The Dark Knight.
I just don't. I just think it's highly
the Nolan
overrated.
Batmans, that's the one that is good to me.
It is by far the Dark Knight. I actually think is a good movie, and I do not think the other two are good movies.
Yeah.
The Dark Knight's the only one where Batman's like authoritarian tendencies are at all kind of criticized, and kind of the movie's about like, maybe this isn't okay. And then they kind of seem to forget about that in the next one.
Yeah, no, in the third movie, it's just like him. It's just him and a bunch of cops beating up people that are messing up the stock market. And I'm just like, yo, Batman, how could you be any more like, why don't you just have a badge at this point, dude?
Because then maybe sometimes
then he would be bound by the rules.
I mean, he wouldn't,
that bind cops. What rules are those? You just have to be scared of things, and then everything you can do whatever.
For real. Are there other things that didn't sit right with you, Che, that you wanted to raise?
Yes.
Please tell us.
In the Act 3 battle in Josie and the Pussycats, when Parker Posey is fighting with Josie and Tara Reid is fighting with goons, and Val is fighting with is she fighting with Wyatt?
I think so.
Or, no, yeah,
I think so.
No, yes, she has to be, because she's fighting with someone that takes a while to beat up. Yeah. But she is just doing like the tough gal brute thing, and like the whole time. She's got a little scary spice flavor to her, which is appropriate in terms of like pop culture-ness. But I was just like, oh man, the black girl got to beat a brute in the fight.
That is a very fair criticism.
You know, but again, also because of the way that earlier, like, she's definitely fighting Wyatt because he's the one who's been trying to cut her out. Yeah. So it's also fine. It's fine because, you know, she's going after dude who, frankly, you know, by cutting her out of history has probably also decided that she, in fact, is a brute. So it's like some sort of poetic justice.
I mean, it makes sense for her to be paired with him because...
Yes.
But it's a fair criticism to make. And another thing that comes up a lot in discussions of this film, and I think maybe it was, I watched this with director's commentary, maybe it was in one of the interviews I read, a lot of people point out that it's the black member of the band who's getting edged out and see that as kind of commentary on systemic racism, which is how I saw it.
Yeah.
The filmmakers are like, oh, that wasn't intentional, which is kind of a bit of a bummer to me.
Yeah.
In a way, I'm kind of like, well, it doesn't really change what I think about the film, because whether or not they were trying to do that, they did that, and people are they did it, and people are picking up on it. In a way, it's similar to what we were talking about in terms of the anti-capitalism. Like, they did an anti-capitalism whether or not they were trying to.
Yeah.
That said, though, the anti-capitalism I feel like flows a lot more directly and in a less troubling to me way than what they did, like, just unknowingly with Rosario Dawson's character. If for no other reason than I'm like, so you were trying to do like a colorblind kind of thing? Because that's not...
And then, right. Well, that's the thing. And the thing is, listen, the thing is, it's okay. Kaplan and Elfont in 99 were not conscious of how race plays through everything in that way, even though many other people were. And it was a movie about the music industry, which
they should have.
They
should have.
Which I can't help but feel like has something to do with plantations.
No idea what you're talking
obviously, about. My guy Wyatt puts in the slave mix in the beginning, which of course is a play on the master mix, because I don't think there's not such a thing as a slave mix in
music.
In music, but that's like a note or whatever. But it's like, yeah, whatever. I get it. It's fine. But I did think it was interesting this time around. I definitely saw that. Like he leaves her with the limo, and then he doesn't invite her to the party. And I was just like, yeah, right now I'm reading this as the entire music industry needs like Black people to like start the fire. And then it's like, okay, we got it. We'll take
the profits from here.
We got it. We thought we had it with Iggy Azalea, but now we definitely got it. We definitely got it now. Uh-oh.
Go ahead.
No, it just about them like going like, oh well, we didn't see that. One way I can see them like creating that storyline, not realizing what they were doing, is if you look at the dynamics of the characters, it's like, okay, we have three characters. We know what to do with Josie because she's the lead and she's got the love interest. Fine. We know what to do with Melody because she's the dumb one, source of tons of jokes. Yeah. What do we do with Val? Yeah. Oh, Val's the one who gets cut out. Not seeing that that's what you do. Also, I don't remember, like Val's character is kind of the sort of tougher one in the cartoon from what I remember, but I only remember vaguely. So it's like, okay, what do we do with that character? And then they accidentally do something smart because they were like, oh, we want this thread in the movie that causes a rift.
Right.
What do we accidentally do? And they accidentally do something smart.
To go back to Jeremy Bearimy, and retrocausality, perhaps they were backed into making those creative decisions by the fact that the story always required also the white label industry to push Black people out of it.
Sure.
Like, so that while they didn't realize that was where they had to wind up, and they went on this totally circuitous route where they're just like, oh yeah, this is, and then we'll be like, okay, so her storyline is like the tension between blah, 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 and like then they wound up with it. So it's like, I don't want to like, it's kind of like it was a happy accident, but it was also like, oh, they tapped into they stopped steering and just started driving and got where they needed to go and didn't even have, they didn't consciously know that they were.
And also Val's the one who's like more skeptical of all the music industry stuff and kind of sees through some of the bullshit. And it's like, wait a second.
Yes, you've been there before.
Yeah, and it's not just that Wyatt's edging her out. Like that's part of why is because he's like, she's going to get this. She's a troublemaker. She's going to pick up on it. That said, it did bug me a bit this time. It doesn't really come through very often, but occasionally they do like nod to this idea that Val is like angrier or has an anger management problem or something, which we don't really see. There's no time in the movie where I'm like... like she's reading that self-help book at the beginning, and at first I'm like, oh, haha, she's reading a book about like how to manage your anger. Relatable because we've all got a lot of anger. But then I'm like, but also they're kind of doing the angry Black woman thing in this movie.
She's the hot-headed one. Well, I'm also embarrassed to admit that the Black character in my 1999 superhero film was also the hot-headed one, and we came up with it based on their superpower. And based on our friend who we were like, oh my God, this guy has to be this character. And yet we painted ourselves right into a whole bunch of like, there's a lot of tropes in that thing.
I mean,
that in retrospect, that we wrote in retrospect that I'm just like, wow, we were boys in 1999 and it shows.
And by the same token, Black characters should be allowed to be angry in movies. That's
I know.
not the problem. I mean, it is hard that like because of these ongoing tropes that are racistly wielded, you're thinking about how what narrative you're playing into.
Yeah. And in during that era, it was like, well, who's the black character? It's like you only get one black character in a movie.
Right.
So like if they're the hothead and no one else is, that's fucked up.
Exactly.
Like once you've been to Wakanda and you realize you can make a movie with like virtually no white people in it at all, then it's like, yo, man, sky's the limit.
This reminds me of, that reminds me of, though, now I haven't seen this myself, but Josie and the Pussycats do appear in the Riverdale TV show, and they are all black in the Riverdale TV show.
That's true. That's why some of us used to watch that. I mean, that's not the only reason why, but some of us used to watch Riverdale who are on this podcast, and then actually all of us at least tried to watch Riverdale.
I stopped,
but like Che and I watched it for longer.
It got too creepy for me too quick. I couldn't.
There was a lot. There was a lot to the Riverdale show. Has a lot going for it. It also has a lot going against it. It had Luke Perry. It had Jingle Jangle.
I didn't even get to Luke Perry.
It's fucking did have.
And I mean, that
Jangle.
still delights me. Like it makes me think, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have stopped watching Riverdale. But
no.
Yeah, no. I stopped years ago.
And you know, it's still
every
running.
once in a while I find that out, and I'm just like, wait, that show's still on?
Which one?
Riverdale. How is Riverdale still on?
Exactly. Because the CW doesn't cancel shows.
Yo.
Okay.
Like it let Supernatural go for 15 years, 10 years beyond the actual end of the show.
Shit.
I know because I watched every single episode. Even though I complained about almost every single episode.
Wait, the show kept going even after it was over? It was just like, this is just like the studio.
Showing an empty space.
Just cameras just came on.
It was so popular. The original creator left after year 5 saying like, I made the show I wanted to make. They have the literal biblical apocalypse as the season 5 finale. And he's like, I made the show I wanted to make. I did what I wanted to do with these characters. I'm going to move on. And then, but CW was like, okay, but like, people really like this show. We're not done. 10 years later, back like a year ago now at this point, the show ended. But it kind of ended 10 years before. Because the CW is like, are people still watching this? Can we still sell ad time? Then this show is going forever.
Yeah, doesn't matter. It can be a whole
not Black
new
Lightning,
cast.
apparently, but...
Everything else.
Wow. What
else didn't we like about these movies? Anything? I front-loaded with all the stuff I didn't like about Speed Racer, and
yeah, I
think we covered all the Josie stuff that I look askance at. Oh, I don't love it when Rosario Dawson says something to Alexandra about her mustache. I don't like that moment.
Yeah,
there's you know what, the meanness, the antagonistic relationship that they have with Alexandra is like definitely not healthy at all. But it's not like a fun frenemy thing. It's like a body shamey.
It feels out of place in the movie to me because it's so contrary to, I'm just like, okay, I buy that this character is like annoying and they don't like her. That's fine, but they don't really show us that. What they show us is just some kind of mean girl shit, which kind of is unfortunate.
There's
a weird level to that relationship in which they never, they ask why she's there, but they never really try to exclude her. They never really exclude her from anything. She comes in being an asshole and they just respond kind of at her level with you're coming in here being the rich girl asshole and we're going to because she is a rich girl in it and they're going to take her down a little bit, but they never say you can't play with us. They never say you can't hang with us. They never, when Josie has her big revelation, the person in the studio booth with her is Alexandra.
Yes.
And Alexandra's being herself.
Oh my God, you're sleeping with him.
And she's this whole thing.
A line that cracks me up.
But they never say they never have they're shitty to her. They're all those things which I agree suck and don't really hold up very well. But they never reject her, really.
But maybe they should. If they don't like her, maybe they're just like, hey, we're not that into you, rather than this weird toxic dynamic where they're just like hanging around.
I don't think they don't like her. Okay. I don't think they don't. I don't think that they don't like anybody. If that sentence made any sense.
I think that they're still young and they don't quite know, what to do about it. They probably, I don't know. But I'll tell you who does reject her is the federal agent in the end, who in one of the best comic timing moments of anything that has ever happened, when they're just done learning about like it's what matters on the inside, he comes in by saying, holy shit, that girl's got a skunk on her head. Oh no, it's just her hair. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen, with the exception of in Death to Smoochie, Robin Williams says he's like drinking hot tea or coffee or something, and he says, well, they can't take away my dignity, and then he spills it. He's like, fuck my balls. And it's like such a dumb joke, but because obviously Robin Williams is like, you know, he can see the Matrix, man, you want to get Jesus, kid, I haven't been thrown like that in a while.
Can we talk about how also it's really effective at the end of Josie and the Pussycats when it's revealed that not only has this corporation been putting the messages in music, but that they're doing it in conjunction with the U.S. government, who then come and arrest Wyatt and Fiona because they're just like, we need a scapegoat. Like, we need to just pretend like this was you. And they make that so clear because it's like, and it's like, hitting the triumphant beat of like, oh, the bad guys got what's coming to them, and so we've got closure. But it's like there's no closure because they're just like, obviously, like the people really pulling the puppet strings are like, well, you guys just need to take the fall for this. And maybe some critics, that's what they mean when they say the film is cynical. I just thought it was realistic in terms of
that was real.
Things are.
They're like, we won, but really, we the audience know that they did not in fact win. They
didn't win that battle. But then they go on stage and they play something different, something you haven't heard.
Maybe you like it. Maybe it's okay if you like it. It's okay if you don't. Decide for yourself. Yeah. It's cool.
It's cool if you like it. It's okay if you don't.
That's kind of what I want to put on all of my art moving forward. Just put it
at the front.
Yeah, the Josie McCoy promise.
It's okay if you don't.
Like it. We are putting that as a quote at the front of Reveal. It's cool if you like it. It's okay if you don't. Just decide for yourself, Josie McCoy.
Can we just add that to our little, animated logo that we put at the front of everything?
Just I need to revise that really anyway. Quick. Yeah.
Yeah, add that actually. It's cool if you like it. It's okay if you. Yeah.
And then our logo flies through it, like all the letters explode out, like.
That is basically our philosophy of filmmaking.
Kind of. We just kind of do whatever the fuck we want.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, y'all ain't fucking paying for it anyway, so I'm gonna make what I want.
Exactly.
So there's another thing about this isn't another thing that I disliked at all, or that sat weird, because I guess dislike is not a word I can really use with Josie and the Pussycats. But so, right, once White Frame has brainwashed Josie into thinking, this is what I said, this is my note. Josie believes the lies about her own primacy. She thinks she did all the work, and wow, if that ain't white people, I don't know what is. That's my note. So, but it's she's just why do you keep saying our music? Val is what are you talking? She's like, I write all our songs. And Val's like, what are you talking about? No, you don't. We write them together. And there's another moment where it's just yo, what are you talking? My country? What the fuck are you talking about, buddy?
It's basically
according to the white framing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And and in that moment, white frame.
It's Fox News, and Josie's your dad, or grandpa, or whoever. Whoever watched Fox News and became different,
not mine.
but not really. That's one of the fun things where I'm like, yeah, this thing really changed my dad or my uncle or something. It's like, did it? Because did it?
It tapped
or did
into
it just
some
give them
seeds
permission?
that grew, maybe, but...
I mean, you know, like it does build an alternative like reality, but it's like you can't, like, if you don't already have those on ramps, like you're gonna be I'm not. This is all alternative.
I mean,
it's a
some
thing
of
that you
us,
have to be able to get in. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we did Fox News as a whole. That's a whole other thing. I think, but yes, you need those on ramps, or else you're just going to be like, this is abrasive and terrible. I'm going to turn this off. I can't stand to watch this. Or you're going to hate watch it, or you're going to watch it to get, like, you know, info on the opposition or whatever. Any of the ways that any number of people do watch Fox News and not become brainwashed. But
yeah, although I think some of them start that way and then get brainwashed, because they don't recognize that they have they don't recognize they have the little seeds of it, the on-ramps, as you say. It's like, you know, I mean, I know I avoid it because I know that there are things there from growing up and being living in a very conservative space when I was growing up. And I'm like, every once in a while, I was like, you see those things and hear something. And I'm like, wait a second. Then I go like, nope, stop. That's a thing that you already looked at and rejected because it's stupid.
But if that's all you're eating, like, I get why people like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The seed is nurtured and grows.
Let's see. Another Speed Racer thing I just wanted to mention is like when he goes when Royalton is showing him around. EP Royalton Esquire is showing him around, and they go to the like big fancy dinner where he meets Cannonball Taylor. Like, it's like, what's really cool is that in that moment, you know, Royalton is showing him like, Cannonball Taylor, you could be the next Cannonball Taylor. And Speed's like, wow, I could be the next Cannonball Taylor. And then as the movie progresses and you learn what Cannonball Taylor is, and it's like, yo, son, if you had signed that deal, you would have been the next Cannonball Taylor. And like, just there's some, like, I know that that's not like next level or anything. That's just like filmmaking. Like, where it's like, you know, but like, I just really like that. Like, I really like the way the movie uses some of those just like archetypes. Like, here's where you meet what you could become. Here's the fallen version of yourself or whatever. And it's just so satisfying.
It is. It's super satisfying, excellent filmmaking.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that thing, like with, I think a lot of things that the Wachowskis have done is what really is impressive is not that they are like what they're doing is actually a new thing. It's that they do it in a way that takes it to another level, and they do very well. They take the things that everybody's doing. Like The Matrix is something that had in many ways been done. Even that same year, The 13th Floor comes out.
Yes.
Year before, you've got Dark City. It's not new in its
Dark City and Blade.
And actually, like,
Blade isn't the same movie as it's like if you take Dark City and then you graft like Blade's like energy on it, then
and
you have
The Matrix is literally shot on the same sets as Dark City. And
well,
they're literally a lot of the same sets. And it's like, okay, it's doing the same things, but it transcends because they take a lot of these things, they fit them together, and they do a lot of the same action movie stuff. And they're like, okay, but we're investing more meaning into this, or like personal meaning into it. Like they have a perspective that they're not like, okay, but we want people to get this out of it. They just have a perspective. It's coming,
and they
as
care
we were saying.
about it.
Yes.
They deeply care, you know, like sometimes like they're very earnest filmmakers, you know, to a fault at points.
Exactly. Yeah. For better or for worse, depending on whether or not it's Speed Racer or
But it's
Jupiter
certainly
Ascending.
refreshing, if nothing else. Like, I find their earnestness refreshing when so much filmmaking is so cynical and, you know, more about what they're passionate about is impressing whomever in one way or another, whether that's financial success or like, oh, look, we did a cutting edge camera thing, so I can claim you know.
Right. Yeah. People always, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot to say this. I know you guys are like,
what?
We've been recording for 17 hours. Che, stop. This major thing here, I queued up
Look at those colors. Look at all the purple.
Let me see here.
Yeah, man.
When he puts him in the purple suit and it's this like power play. You're in my color
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, you're in my colors now. Yeah, no, the whole thing is so like...
Here we go. Class clips.
Like they leaned
there
into
it is. Speed Racer. Which part do you want from that sequence? Because I have a short version and a long version.
It's this what starting at 48:04 on the real thing. So it's after he says, so I'm going to ask you one last time. Are you ready?
Right.
That's why I spent $3 million on this twisted, burned chunk of metal to remind me what's really important.
There you go. All right.
Sweet. Okay, let's hit it.
Driving this rebuilt Whittaker for Iodine Industries, parts spun out in the second lap and went down as a DNF. A forgettable, pathetic finish. So bad that afterwards Iodine stock dropped 6 points. But Aspin, Burns, sat guzzled in cold fresh milk in Victory Lane, 1,000 cameras taking his picture. Cirrus Aeronautics saw almost a 12-point gain, which immediately blocked Peninsula Power Cell from being able to afford the price of a complete takeover. This put Joel Goldman, the CEO of Iodine Inc., in the exact position he wanted to be in. By first buying controlling interest in his own company at a devalued price, he then brokered a merger with Cirrus that immediately sent Iodine into the game's record book, the only record book that matters. Look out that window. There isn't a single plane or helicopter or K-Harrier that isn't powered by iodine fuel cells. That's what racing is about. It has nothing to do with cars or drivers. All that matters is power and the unassailable might of money.
Okay, skip to the next Royalton part.
What was that?
Yeah, keep going to the next Royalton part.
Okay, yeah. There we go. I think this bit, yeah.
I've seen that same cow-eyed sailors and so look of disbelief. Every bumpkin who comes in with the sticks looks exactly as you do now. I won't bother proving it to you. You walk away from me, you walk away from this deal, you'll know how true it is soon enough. So last chance. You ready to put away your toys and grow up? Are you ready to make more money in 1 year than your father made in his whole life? Are you ready to become a real race car driver? Then sign that contract.
Woo, okay.
Was that the bit?
Now, that's the bit. Are you ready to become a real race car driver? Because in a Josie et le Pussycats,
I believe that's Pussy Shot.
Pussy Shot. Can we just take a moment to talk about Alan Cumming? Is hilarious.
Yes. He's the best. I love Alan Cumming so much. I want to go to his club. I would watch anything he's in.
Oh my God,
for him. Because he's the best.
For just a little bit of him in a kind of similar-ish role, Schmigadoon on Apple TV Plus.
Oh, people have been. Really? I've heard some good things about that show.
It's pretty funny. It's
people
like actually doing a musical. It's like
it.
this series, but also very self-aware, and what Keegan-Michael Key and I really like God, what's her name from SNL? Starts with a C.
I don't know who's
the
on
underused
that show.
The girl who you're stuck talking to at the party.
Oh yeah, she's funny. I don't remember her
She's
name,
funny
though.
and super underused on SNL, and like she's the co-lead of Schmigadoon, and it's really kind of highlighting how underutilized she is just in general. But I guess Lorne Michaels must realize that on some level as he co-produced Schmigadoon.
I'm dying for a pair of old school tree torn. Jerking tree torn to the new Adidas.
same thing.
It's the same thing.
Man.
It's the same.
They're the same devil.
You got to be ready
Even
to
with
do
the same
something that
accent.
starts with an R.
Yep.
Racing, recording. But yeah, the villains have the same accent. The devil is English, which is kind of accurate.
Yeah.
I guess.
One other thing about Wyatt is when they put the sign up, the Josie and the Pussycats sign, and they're like, "What if no one likes us? Like, what if no one likes me?" or whatever Josie says, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry, we'll just put someone else up there." And then he laughs maniacally. And then he never says, haha, just kidding. He's just telling the truth and laughing maniacally because he's the villain of the movie. But the tonality is awesome. It's like so good. He's the best.
Like at, I don't know, at being Alan Cumming, I guess. But like a lot of people aren't really the best at being whatever it is they're trying to do. Like there's other people who do it better. Nobody does Alan Cumming better than Alan Cumming.
No, but also like at the same time though, he is generally like excellent. He kind of is a little bit pigeonholed into these kinds of roles because I mean, he was amazing as Nightcrawler, and that is completely different from everything else he's done.
But he's a sweetheart though too. Like IRL.
Yeah.
Same year though, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry, what?
Is Josie in X2
no,
the
X2
same
came out
year?
the next year because I remember that there was some. I remember when it came out, when X2 was coming out, it was post 9/11, and so there was conversations. There was serious thinking about like looking at the movie and going like, oh, but you know they have a moment where they're being chased by the military in jets, and you know how do they respond to that? And you know. Filmmakers are talking about that and they're like, oh, but they don't really come in conflict with them. You know, we wanted to think about that. Like it's separate. It's a separate thing. There was like, I remember that specifically being a thing and me going like, okay. Like, honestly, I think one of the things that probably progressively like hurt those X-Men movies was the post 9/11 era because the government's supposed to be the bad guys in the X-Men. And they couldn't be, and they could have been. So just to wrap up, hey Che, like can people find you on the internet? Should they find you on the internet? Do you want them to find you on the internet? Maybe hug you on the internet? I don't know.
I'd rather not.
That's fine.
People hug me on the internet, but you know, you can find me on Instagram at Che Broadnax. I mean, I'm on Instagram and the thing is @ Che Broadnax. I don't mean it's like @ the word @Che Broadnax. That'd be preposterous and confusing.
Although
@Che Broadnax.
I think it would be kind of great if you did that though. I don't think anybody else is going to have that name, so.
Maybe that's, you know, I've been wanting to start a new Instagram because my Instagram, you know, like I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, yeah, I like you. You're my friend. I'll follow you. I like you. I like your art. I'll follow you. I like you. I like to hear important information about this stuff. I'll follow you. And now it's just like, this is too overwhelming. So I want to make a secret one that everyone now knows about because it's at Che Broadnax. But that's going to be the one where when I go to it, it's just like, well, you'll have to.
We should all just have second like accounts on all social media, like Twitter and Instagram and stuff. That's just and then our same username is on the other one, as on our public account, and then it's easy for our friends to find.
Yeah, sometimes the point of having a private account though is you don't want to be easy to find. Some of us who have multiple Twitter accounts might say.
I don't know anything about.
No,
I don't know anything about nothing. So yeah, find Che on the Instagram at Che Broadnax, not at Che Broadnax, because at is, you know, he is not an
exactly.
That's not for you.
It's not like I love the Empire. I hate it. Oh! One last thing. There's a moment. And Josie and the Pussycats, Josie's like, I care, or something. And it's like totally the Luke Skywalker, I care. And I'm like, why is he saying that just then?
Because it's in the collective unconscious, you know? That's all.
It is, yeah.
And with that, thank you all for joining us. And, we'll be back eventually, probably with more episodes and almost certainly with Che again. And, come back or things will happen.
Oh, okay.
All right, I'm going to cut the recording. Bye.
Please.
The Celluloid Mirror is a 4 Mile Circus production hosted by Nicole Solomon and Sean Mannion. Our theme music is Twisted by Kevin MacLeod. You can hear more from Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.filmmusic.io. Please take a few moments to rate and review The Celluloid Mirror on your podcast platform of choice. It really helps with discoverability. If you have questions or comments about what you heard on the show or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to email us at info@4milecircus.com or seek us out on social media. We are at 4 Mile Circus on Twitter and Instagram. Want more from the Celluloid Mirror? Sean and Nicole join our Patreon at patreon.com/4milecircus. You'll get early access to episodes, uncut video of our recording sessions, access to our Discord server, and much more. To learn more about everything we do, visit us at 4milecircus.com.
I ended up in that hall of mirrors. There was another girl. She looked like me. Exactly like me.
Can you come with me in my dreams?
That'll do, baby.
What happens when the story dies? The evil is set free.
I have to return some videotapes.